To the world, he was my loving brother. To me, he was my only shelter. But when I trusted him with my soul, he sold it like it was nothing. But then, I became the fire that burned down everything he ever loved. To the world, he was my loving brother. To me, he was my only shelter. When our parents died in that car crash, I was barely 12. The world became too big, too loud, and far too cruel. But Daniel, my older brother, my hero, my everything, held my hand through every storm. He was 20, already working 2 jobs, sacrificing everything just to keep me in school, keep a roof over our heads, and make sure I didn't feel like an orphan. People called him a saint. They'd look at us and whisper, "He's such a good brother." I believed that with all my heart. Daniel wasn't just my brother, he was my safe place. He braided my hair for my first school dance when I didn't know how. He read me bedtime stories when nightmares wouldn't let me sleep. When I got sick and couldn't move, he sat by my bed for 3 days straight, feeding me soup and holding my hand. He missed work, lost money, but he never let me feel like a burden. And I adored him. He told me, "You're the only good thing I've got left, Layla. I'll protect you till my last breath." I believed him. Oh God, I believed him. For years, it was us against the world. I studied hard, tried to make him proud. When I got into college on a scholarship, he cried. Not just little tears, he sobbed into my shoulder and said, "You made it. We made it." He said he'd do anything to make sure I had the life he couldn't. But I didn't see the shadows growing behind his smile. Not then. Not when I should have. Because love can blind you. And when you've wrapped your soul around someone's promise, you don't see the knife they're hiding behind their back. I didn't know that my brother, the one who raised me, the one I would have died for, was already selling pieces of my life behind closed doors. I didn't know that the only person I called home would soon destroy every part of who I was. But I was about to learn. And when I did, the fire inside me wouldn't stop burning. Looking back now, I can see the cracks had always been there. Tiny ones. Almost invisible. But love is a dangerous thing when it's blind. It started small. Daniel stopped coming home some nights. Said he was working late, picking up side jobs. I believed him. He'd done it before. But this time, there were whispers. A neighbor asked me one morning, "Is Daniel doing okay?" I saw him arguing with some rough-looking guys last week. I laughed it off. Said he was just stressed. Said he was trying to pay my college fees. But the truth was, I didn't even know he could lie. Then came the night I came home from campus to find the apartment door cracked open. My heart raced. I stepped inside, calling his name. "Daniel?" No answer. But everything was wrong. Drawers open. Our dad's old watch, gone. Mom's necklace, gone. And Daniel, just sitting on the couch, hands in his hair, like the world had collapsed on him. "What happened?" I asked, rushing to him. He looked up with red eyes. "We were robbed." I believed him. I wanted to believe him. But my gut whispered otherwise. The locks weren't broken. Nothing was forced. Only the things that held real value were gone. And Daniel couldn't look me in the eye. Still, I hugged him. Told him it wasn't his fault. That we'd get through it. That he had gotten me through worse. He didn't say a word. The next week, I noticed my student loan login had changed. Password, denied. Access, denied. I called the bank. They said someone had withdrawn from my education fund. My stomach dropped. Only Daniel had access. When I confronted him, he didn't even deny it. He just looked at me and said, "I needed it, Layla. I was drowning. I had no choice." No choice? No choice but to steal the very future he swore he'd protect? I remember standing in that hallway, everything shaking. My hands. My voice. My faith in him. "You could have told me," I whispered. He grabbed my shoulders. I raised you. I built this life for you. I gave up everything, Layla. And then I saw it. The resentment, the exhaustion, the bitterness he buried for years. His love had rotted into something sharp and ugly. Something that still smiled in public, but cut behind closed doors. He said, "You owe me." I couldn't breathe. I realized then, I wasn't his sister anymore. I was his debt, his asset, his sacrifice. And I had been too blind, too trusting, too desperate to believe in the boy who once held my hand through every nightmare. Now, he was the nightmare. And I had just woken up. I stopped sleeping after that night. There's a special kind of pain that comes from betrayal, not by an enemy, but by the one person you thought would never hurt you. It doesn't stab you. It seeps. Quiet. Slow. Poison. I tried to forgive him. God knows I tried. I told myself maybe he was just scared. Lost. Maybe if I worked harder, maybe if I held things together, he'd come back. The brother I loved would return. But I was wrong. Because what came next broke me in ways I didn't know a soul could break. One evening, he introduced me to a man named Victor. Said he was a businessman, investing in my future. "Victor believes in you, Layla," Daniel told me with a tight smile. "He can help pay off your tuition. Set you up. All he wants is to mentor you. Guide you." Something felt off. Victor looked at me like I was a prize on display. But Daniel stood behind him, nodding. Encouraging. So I smiled, shook the man's hand, and agreed to have coffee. That coffee turned into meetings. Meetings turned into contracts. Suddenly, I was modeling part-time, signing image rights, attending parties. And Daniel kept telling me, "It's all for you. I'm just trying to help." But I wasn't blind anymore. I saw how Victor's hand lingered on my back. How the clothes got smaller. The shoots got darker. The offers became uncomfortable. I asked Daniel, "Are you sure this is safe? Are you sure these people are real?" And he said the words I'll never forget. "You owe me this, Layla. I gave you everything. It's time you do something for me." My own brother had sold me. Not for money. Not for love. For control. For power. For the twisted satisfaction of owning the very soul he once promised to protect. And I let him. Because I couldn't imagine fighting him. Not yet. Not while I was still bleeding. But that was the night I died. The night I smiled through tears at another party, shaking hands with strangers, pretending to be someone I wasn't. While Daniel stood in the corner, watching me like a puppet master, strings in hand. That night, I looked at myself in the mirror and saw someone else. Not the girl who used to laugh in the rain. Not the sister who once believed in miracles. No, I saw the ashes. But what Daniel forgot. Ashes can still burn. And from the ruins he left me in, something darker was starting to rise. Something he'd never be able to cage again. I stopped crying. It didn't happen overnight. It was a slow death, the kind where tears dry up, and silence replaces every scream that once begged to be heard. I started playing the part. Quiet. Compliant. Sweet. Just the way Daniel wanted. Just the way Victor liked. But inside? Inside, I was building something. Piece by piece. Layer by layer. Like firewood stacked for a storm. I studied everyone. Learned names. Observed patterns. Listened behind doors. I learned Victor's passwords. His routine. His contacts. Who paid? Who lied? Who owed? I read the fine print of every contract he helped me sign. And I traced every one of them back to Daniel. He wasn't just complicit. He orchestrated it. He had signed over my image, my earnings, even my autonomy. Everything in his name, masked behind guardianship and financial management. The world saw a devoted older brother sacrificing for his sister. I saw a man who used my trauma as currency. But I let him believe I was broken. That I'd stay small. Obedient. grateful. I let him think he still had power over me, but I had already started moving in the shadows. At night, while Daniel slept, I took pictures of documents, email copies to myself, printed what mattered. I made a folder, black, unlabeled, hidden beneath a false drawer bottom. I gathered contracts, account details, evidence of fraud, even audio recordings. I documented everything. And I learned something else. Daniel owed dangerous people. People who didn't care about loyalty, blood, or love. He wasn't just selling me for power. He was selling me to survive. And I realized then, he wasn't my protector. He was a drowning man, and I was the weight he tied to his own neck to stay afloat. But I was done sinking for him. So I waited for the right moment. One last party. One last game. Victor's annual celebration was coming up. Politicians, celebrities, investors, all under one roof. All wearing masks, literally and figuratively. Daniel said I had to go. I smiled. I wore red. The same shade as rage. The same color as revenge. He didn't notice the fire in my eyes. He didn't see the storm in my smile. Because the girl he broke, she was gone. And the woman he made in her place was ready to burn his kingdom to the ground. The mansion Victor rented for his annual party looked like something out of a dream. Marble floors, chandeliers like galaxies of glass, music drifting through velvet air, and people with faces too pretty to be trusted. It was a masquerade. How fitting. Everyone wore a mask. But mine wasn't made of silk or sequins. Mine was made of survival. Daniel walked beside me in a sleek black tuxedo like the proud brother he pretended to be. His hand rested on my back like a claim, a warning, a leash. "You look beautiful tonight," he said, smiling at me. I smiled back. And I wanted to scream. He had no idea. No idea that in the flash drive hidden in my clutch were enough files to end him. No idea that I had copied every account, every lie, every forged signature, every bank trail. No idea that 3 hours before, I had mailed hard copies to 3 journalists and 1 investigator with an anonymous note that read, "You missed the real story. Here's your headline." No idea that tonight wasn't a party. It was a funeral. And he was the guest of honor. Victor greeted us at the top of the marble staircase, 2 champagne glasses in hand, his smile too wide, too polished. "Layla, my star," he said, handing me a glass. "You're glowing." I accepted the drink, letting my fingers brush his. I knew what he wanted. What they all wanted. But tonight, I wasn't prey. I was the blade. Daniel mingled, shook hands, charmed his way through the room like a man too high on his own illusion to notice the cracks forming beneath him. But the moment I had waited for came around 11:17 p.m. That's when I saw him, Detective Marcus Hale, in a tailored suit, mask on, pretending to sip wine at the corner of the ballroom. I had approached him 2 weeks earlier. Anonymous tip. Private meeting. I showed him just enough to make him curious. Photos, forged documents, timelines, names. And I promised him more. Tonight. I walked toward him slowly, my movements rehearsed. Smiling. Laughing. Pretending. When I reached him, I whispered just 4 words. "The Queen's in check." He nodded once, turned, and vanished into the crowd. I headed to the private study next. The door was unlocked just as I asked the staff to leave it. Inside, behind the desk, the safe was hidden behind a false painting. Victor's secrets lived there. Daniel's cut did too. I knelt, opened the panel, entered the code. 0912. My birthday. Of course. They had built their entire empire on me. My image. My name. My trust. Even my birth date was a password in their machine. When the safe popped open, I didn't flinch. I pulled out the folder I had been waiting for, the master agreement. The one that gave Victor full rights to my likeness, work, and name. The one Daniel had signed for me. I replaced it with a forged version, one that revoked all rights, one that would tear their empire down from within, one that would, in legal terms, make everything they'd done since a crime. I had printed it on identical paper. Same font. Same weight. I had even replicated Victor's notary stamp. Forged Daniel's handwriting myself. Poetic, wasn't it? They taught me how to fake a smile. I taught myself how to fake a signature. As I walked back toward the ballroom, I caught sight of Daniel near the fireplace, laughing. He was glowing. He thought he won. I sipped my champagne and watched the moment stretch like silence before an explosion. And then it came. 3 men in dark suits entered the ballroom. No masks. No smiles. Federal agents, not guests. One of them pointed at Daniel. The music stopped. So did his laughter. And in that split second, as they walked toward him, I saw his world begin to fracture. He turned to me, confused, lips parting like he was about to speak. But I stepped back into the crowd and said nothing. Because I wasn't his sister anymore. Not his puppet. Not his pawn. I was the fire he fed for years. And now, I was watching it consume him, slowly, beautifully, without mercy. The room erupted into chaos. Gasps. Shouts. Champagne flutes dropped and shattered like glass hearts on marble. The music sputtered out as if the air had been sucked from the room. And Daniel? He stood frozen in place, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. His mask had slipped, not the physical one, but the one he'd worn for years. The loving brother. The selfless guardian. The man everyone thought had sacrificed everything for his sister. Now he looked like a child caught stealing, not a king being crowned. The agents circled him, calm and calculated. One read him his rights. The other snapped silver handcuffs around his wrists. His body jerked like he still didn't believe it, like this had to be a dream. He looked at me. And in that gaze, there were questions. What did you do? Why? How? But I didn't answer. Because I didn't need to. Victor tried to intervene, stumbling forward in outrage, throwing out words like misunderstanding, donation, mentorship, consent, but Detective Hale wasn't listening. He was holding the documents I'd handed over earlier that night. One page at a time, Victor's empire unraveled. Fraud, exploitation, identity theft, misappropriation of funds, misuse of guardianship, and human trafficking, because buried beneath the glitz and glamour of contracts and modeling portfolios were real crimes. Names of other girls. Others like me. Broken, silenced, sold. I stood at the edge of the ballroom, unnoticed now, like a ghost at her own funeral. Except I wasn't dead. I was reborn. The press arrived within the hour. They always do. Cameras flashed like lightning. Questions were shouted. Names were leaked. Daniel's photo was plastered online by midnight. His face caught mid-expression between confusion and betrayal. Oh, the irony. He used to say no one would ever believe I could live without him. That I was too fragile. Too naive. That I'd fall apart if he ever left. But I hadn't just survived his absence. I'd orchestrated it. And for the first time, the world saw me not as a victim, but as a reckoning. I walked out of that mansion at 1:04 a.m. No one followed. The sky was black. The stars were silent. But I didn't feel small anymore. I wasn't scared. I wasn't caged. I was free. And somewhere behind me, in a jail cell or an interrogation room, Daniel was realizing that the sister he'd used, sold, and shattered was the one who'd taken everything from him in return. But it wasn't over yet. Because revenge isn't just about destruction. It's about revelation. And I still had one more secret to expose. Freedom felt strange at first. Like waking up in a room that had always been dark, only to realize the door was never locked. I had simply been too afraid to open it. But now, the door was gone. Daniel was in custody. Victor too. The papers were flooded with headlines. brother and businessman caught in modeling exploitation ring. My face, once used to sell lies, was now used to tell the truth. But something still gnawed at me. Because Daniel wasn't just cruel. He wasn't just greedy. He had been calculated. And he never did anything without a plan. I knew there had to be more. Something deeper. Something he never meant me to find. So I went back. Not to the mansion. Not to Victor's studios. I went to the one place I had avoided for years. Our childhood home. The place where the lies began. It stood empty now. Abandoned after our parents passed. It still smelled like dust and old secrets. The wallpaper peeled at the corners, and the floor creaked like it remembered every fight we ever had. I walked through the hallway and felt it, the weight of memories pressing against the walls. But it wasn't nostalgia that brought me there. It was suspicion. Daniel had once told me, everything I ever did was to protect you. I used to believe that. Now I wondered what he had been protecting me from. In his old room, I found the lockbox. Hidden behind the false panel in the closet wall. Exactly where I thought it would be. I pried it open. Inside were documents, originals, not copies. And photos. Old ones. Ones I didn't recognize. Newspaper clippings. Court transcripts. And a journal. Daniel's. The pages were chaotic. Scrawled handwriting. Ripped corners. Paragraphs scratched out. But the story was there, twisted, buried, and horrifying. It started when I was 12. And it wasn't Daniel who became my guardian out of love. It was court appointed. Because our father had been accused of abusing me. The case never went to trial. I had blocked out the memories. Dissociation, they called it. Trauma so deep it erases itself. But the notes were there, school counselors reporting signs, neighbors hearing screams, medical reports with bruises no one explained. Daniel had been the one who testified. He was only 17. And he begged the judge to give him custody. Not our relatives. Not the system. He wanted me. Not because he loved me. Because he needed control. Because he didn't trust anyone else to handle the damage. Because, as he wrote, if I can shape her pain, I can shape her. I dropped the journal. My lungs felt too tight to breathe. So that's what it was. It wasn't just about money. Or survival. It was about power. About molding me into something he could own. From the moment our father was gone, Daniel stepped into that role, not as a savior, but as a silent successor. I wasn't his sister. I was his project. And everything he built, every contract, every manipulation, every smile, had been constructed on top of that first betrayal. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Because now, I had the truth. And unlike Daniel, I wasn't going to hide it. So I scanned every page, every photo, every record. And I sent it, anonymously, to the press, the police, the therapist who once tried to help me, and to a new victims advocacy group that had been created because of my case. I didn't do it for justice. Not this time. I did it for the girl I used to be. The 12-year-old who cried herself to sleep in that same house. The girl no one listened to. The one who forgot what love was supposed to feel like. I did it for her. Because she deserved to be heard. And I would make sure the whole world listened. But then I became the checkmate he never saw coming. The storm I unleashed didn't end with handcuffs or headlines. It echoed. Daniel's journal sent aftershocks through everything, through the legal system, through our past, through every person who ever called him the good brother. The boy who stepped up became the man who fell hardest. And the world watched. The trial began 6 months later. It was brutal. Not just because of what was said, but because of what I remembered. Trauma doesn't stay buried forever. It waits, quietly, patiently, until the moment it knows you're strong enough to survive it. And sitting there in that courtroom, facing Daniel as he refused to meet my eyes, I realized something no one else could ever understand. I had died once before. Long ago. quietly. But this version of me? She was born in fire. I testified. Not just about the contracts or the stolen money, but about the control, the manipulation, the twisted way he reshaped my identity until I couldn't tell where he ended and I began. About how he turned my body into currency and my pain into profit. And when they showed the journal in court, I watched his face crack, piece by piece, like a mask finally rotting off the skin beneath it. He tried to speak, to explain, to say, I did what I had to, but the world no longer listened. Because now, I had the mic, and I wasn't letting go. Victor pled guilty first. He took a deal in exchange for everything, his assets, his properties, and a full confession. Daniel refused. He fought it, said he was protecting me until the end. But even the jury saw through the illusion. He was found guilty, on all charges, sentenced to 25 years without parole. And in that moment, as the gavel fell and they took him away, I didn't feel relief. I felt power. Not the kind he used. Not domination. Not control. But ownership of my story. Of my body. Of my voice. He took so much from me. But what he didn't expect was that every scar he gave me became a blueprint. And every time he tried to silence me, he accidentally taught me how to roar louder. Now, I live far from the city. In a small house I bought with my own money, under my name. No stage lights. No contracts. Just peace. And a garden that blooms even in autumn. Sometimes I get letters from girls I've never met. They say I saved them. That my story gave them permission to speak. I write them back. Because healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing what you carry. And me? I carry strength. I carry fire. I carry the truth of every girl who was ever broken and told to stay quiet. Daniel once said, "You'd fall apart without me." But he was wrong. Because I didn't fall apart. I shattered on purpose. So I could rebuild myself sharper, stronger, unbreakable. And in the end, to the world, he was my loving brother. To me, he was my safe place. Until I learned I was just a pawn in his game. But then, I became the checkmate he never saw coming.